Hey everyone, welcome to Richard's Retro. This is the Bible in 2022, and I think the only announcement we have this week is, again, if you're in town, we are meeting in person at my house. We'll have some sweet treats, some good times, and converse over our reading this week. My door is open at 7 o'clock, although we'll open the the virtual meeting around 7:30. So as long as you're here before 8, you won't miss any of the good discussion on the Word. For those of you not in town, you can find the link to, we are using Google Meet this week instead of Skype, so it's a different link if you weren't here last week. So do check that out to come to the right place. And it'll ask you, when you get in there, it'll say, please wait to be let in. So don't worry, you will be let in. All right, let's see how quick we can do this one. I hear my videos are kind of long for some people. So we are finishing Exodus this week. We saw Aaron make the golden calf and then lie about it like the 80-year-old that he was. God says, go down to your people. He clearly doesn't want them anymore. They're not his people. He says, your people. But Moses asks him to turn from your fierce anger, relent, and do not bring disaster on your people. Puts it right back on him. But I love this. Moses is asking God to turn from his anger. It's a beautiful picture of intercession. And God wants to do that, right? He wants to be encouraged to do that. And does. And it's great. God says he's going to send him away, but not go with them. And Moses says, we can't go without you. I won't go without you. And the Lord finally says, my presence will go with you, and I will give you rest. We see new stone tablets, and then I love this. When God is making a covenant with them, he says, do not worship any other God, for the Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God. So I love this. God is naming himself, right? We've talked about his names before. Here's one. He's naming himself. And in this instance, he's naming himself jealous. It's a key characteristic of God. And it's one we'll talk about today, because I know I've gotten questions from some people, how is God jealous? Like, jealous is a negative quality. But when you deserve all of those things, and then you are not getting them, wanting them, having that jealous desire towards the things that are rightfully yours, is right. And so it's interesting. We'll talk about it for sure. Moses actually goes back up to see God after the incident with the calf. So he goes up for another 40 days and 40 nights without eating bread or drinking water. So he just 2 back-to-back 40-day fasts. I mean, there's a little bit of time with him in camp, and we don't know how long that time is, but that's still impressive. I mean, 1 is impressive, and he does 2 kind of back-to-back. When he comes back, though, his face is radiant. We'll talk about that, like, why was his face glowing? What are the physical characteristics that would cause that, and what was it glowing with? We see instructions for the tabernacle. They ask for offerings from the people, and they had to, literally, it says the people were restrained from bringing more because they already had more than enough to do all the work. So I love where the people's hearts are at, despite the fact that they are clearly, complaining and constantly looking to worship idols. When God calls them to do a thing, they do it with abundance. When they're called to be giving and generous, they're very generous, and I love that. We see instructions for building the ark, the table, the lampstand, the altar, the courtyard, the priestly garments, and we get instructions for it, and then it says they actually built them all. And then at the end it says the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. I love this. It filled it. Moses could not enter the tent of meeting because the cloud had settled on it, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. God's presence was so dense in this place that Moses could not enter, physically could not enter. It wasn't just spiritual, physically could not enter. I thought that was really cool. All right, we finished Exodus, guys. We made it into Leviticus. We've got lots of laws coming up, instructions for burnt offerings. I thought this was interesting. If the offering is a burnt offering from the flock, from either the sheep or the goats, you're to offer a male without defect. You're to slaughter it at the north side of the altar before the Lord. I wonder why the north side mattered, right? Why does the side of the altar matter? And we see pictures of this when God gives instructions for building future temples. You know, the directions mattered, right? Where the river flowed, where the gates were, where you were supposed to come in from and go out. So I wonder what the significance of the north side was. And if anyone remembers, we'll talk about that tonight. We see the grain offering, and this was interesting. Leviticus 2:13. Season all of your grain offerings with salt. Do not leave the salt of the covenant of your God out of your grain offerings. Add salt to all your offerings. So that's strange to me because, one, I don't think God is actually tasting the offerings. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he does. But I can't imagine it needing salt to, taste better. So why was salt important? Was it just that was commonly used resource, and so it was, it was tradition, it was, part of giving and part of that heart. I love that it ties to later, it says we are the salt of the earth, and so we are, part of that offering. So that was cool, but I'm curious why God cared so much about, well, one, what was in the offerings in the first place, but two, why salt was so important here. And in the same way, we talk about tasting, but when he does a fellowship offering, it says the aroma is pleasing to the Lord. Do you think God smells it, like literally smells it? Yeah, I don't know if his spiritual body actually has the sense of smell, the physical smell. I love that there's provisions for the poor. So anyone that can't afford a lamb can bring 2 doves or a young pigeon. That was awesome that God considers that, right? Like he didn't want anybody to left out of the sin offering. It was a big deal, right? You're supposed to bring a bull, but if you couldn't, there was room for someone else. And actually, sin offering was goat. Yeah, sin offering is goat, not a bull. But that stood out to me. Last thing from Leviticus, when the offering was brought, it said multiple times, any male in the priest family can eat it. Why were the females? I mean, because it wasn't just any priest could eat it, right? Maybe that's what it means. Any priest could eat it, because those would just be the males. But why would only the males be allowed to eat it? Why not, if the offering was the priest's portion, why couldn't he share it with his whole family? All right. In Psalms, we read Psalm 26 and 27. I love 26. It says, Lord, I love the house where you live, the place where your glory dwells. Back then, that would have been the tabernacle. So he would have loved going there to meet with God. But today, we are the place where God lives. And so when we love where God lives, we're loving ourselves and seeking to have him dwell with us, to have his glory dwell in us. In 27, we see the Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The answer is no one. And then in 4, it says, one thing that I ask from the Lord, this only do I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life. And that's just kind of a rallying call for me to seek that, right? Again, we are the dwelling of the Lord now, and so we should seek to make that worthy of his glory. But we are going to live with him in his house, the house he made forever, and that is something to drive towards, and just very exciting. Okay, we finished Philippians as well. Paul talks about not having confidence in our flesh. Specifically, that righteousness comes from God on the basis of faith. And and I love this too. He says, not that I've already obtained all this or have already arrived at my goal. Even Paul calls out that his salvation is not completed yet, right? Yeah, or that his righteousness is not completed yet. Because I mean, we're saved by grace instantly, but there isn't this stop. Like, it doesn't happen and then you're just a completely different person, right? There's still a journey. There's still a race that we're running. And so this goal that we have, and we're still trying to arrive there. We don't obtain it instantly. So take courage in that. And then he praises the Philippians for being joyful givers and says, I love this, don't be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. That's Philippians 4:6. And I love it. I mean, we're told this many times in the Gospels, right? Not to worry, not to be anxious, and to pray without ceasing, and to pray in every situation. But there's an and the afterwards, right? The peace of God will guard your hearts. So that's what we get out of praying and not being anxious, is that peace of God that we can't possibly understand, but it will be there. That's so cool. And then, of course, Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through him who gives me strength. I always loved that verse as a kid. And I mean, it's talking about suffering in this situation, but it's exciting nonetheless. And then we started Hebrews, excuse me, where the author, many believe it's Paul, talks about how Christ is greater than the angels and greater than Moses, even though he was made fully human. I love when he's talking about the angels, he says, are not all angels ministering spirits sent to serve those who will inherit salvation? So this is cool. We talked about angels a few weeks ago, and like, what are they? What was their purpose? And here the author is calling out that their purpose is actually to minister and to serve, which is crazy because I mean, we think of them as like more powerful and spiritual beings, but you know, it's clearly possible that their purpose was to serve us, like that they were created at the same time or around the same time to serve us. Let's see, in Hebrews 2:15, it says, free those who all their lives were held in slavery by their fear of death. So, I mean, that's kind of God's gift, is freeing us from slavery. But the thing that's holding us, I thought this was interesting. Instead of it being sin, it was fear of death holding these people in slavery. And, I mean, God conquered that too. He conquered sin and death. But it was interesting to see that death was chosen as the thing holding people in slavery here. Or the fear of it, rather. And we know perfect love casts out fear, which Christ gave us. And then, as I said, we see Christ being compared to Moses. It says, Moses was faithful as a servant, but Christ was faithful as a son. And so there was that sonship that we get to walk in now as children of God, not just as children of Abraham or Moses. He tells us to encourage one another daily. I think we're doing that at least weekly now. But you know, make sure to encourage each other. And then we're going to talk about Sabbath next week. But that's it for this week. All right, slightly shorter video. Thank you guys for watching. Again, if you made it here, give it a like, subscribe, and add notifications if you want to be notified of my videos when they go out. Otherwise, I hope to see a few of you in person and the rest of you in our Google Meet at 7:30. Cheers.